We are about to start. Please put on your headsets. Please put on your headsets. There's no in-room amplification. And I shouldn't yell in the microphone, probably. Hello? Okay, perfect. Okay. Then let's start. So, hi everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our masterclass today. My name is Andreas Westendorf of EMMA, the sleep company. And I'm the Chief Technology Officer of EMMA and here today to talk you through our journey into composable commerce. So, you might know EMMA as a brand. You might know the company probably from our ads, from TV commercials, from the mattress products that we sell and that are very good. And if you don't sleep on an EMMA mattress, you should definitely try it out. So much for the cross-sell aspect here. But actually, naming EMMA a mattress company would not entirely tell the right story because we are far more than that. We, as EMMA, have big ambitions and we want to be the #1 global sleep brand. And that is probably a very big statement. But to be honest, we are on a very good way to get there. So you probably know that we are a D2C brand and we are selling mattresses and beds, sleepwear overall, but we are also venturing into new categories. There's new and more even exciting stuff to come. And part of that is actually also what we call sleep innovation, up to what we call sleep technology. We're going to touch that briefly today, but today's speech is less about sleep technology and more about e-commerce. We will probably, and not too far of the future, talk more about sleep tech, as this is also a very exciting topic. But today is about our journey into composable commerce. So, as you can see, we kind of have already conquered the globe, so to say. We're making business already in almost all continents. And also being a D2C online brand, we are pretty good in the online aspect. But however, the fact that still 80% of mattress sales today are offline gives us this huge opportunity also to grow into offline and to grow into marketplaces. So there's more opportunity to come. And although our big goal and ambition is also to penetrate the market in a way that we drive even more towards online, we believe that we can do a better online to offline converging user experience for the end customer. So think a little bit, just have said that we are rethinking how the offline marketing of mattresses should be. So what is necessary to sell a mattress? A mattress is a very interesting product because user experience is very much when they're unconscious, when they're asleep. So it is not something that they can directly tell if it has been the right product. So trust is an essential factor when deciding for such a product. Trust that we create via a very good user journey in our selling propositions on our marketing channels, but also, and that's very important for us, test wins. Because the testing authorities in countries, in different countries globally, they basically are one of the strongest factor of creating trust and making people or influencing people buying decisions. This and personal recommendation of customers. So we are also very proud that our products are so good that they have won over 40 of those global testing awards. And this is also part of the success story of our growth. I teased it a little bit. So what about smart products? What about sleep technology? We recently did something that is kind of new in the industry, and that is an embedded product. You know, For me, it is always looking at an industry like ours. It's always the question: how much of digitization is actually possible in this industry? And I usually differentiate between two classes of digitization. The first class of digitization is where I would actually call it second degree digitization, is when you make everything about the buying process, about the supply chain, about how you get the product and the experience the product more digital. You make it more efficient. That is why you build ecosystems and platforms for e-commerce, for supply chain management, all around that. And probably Amazon is the master of that because they were able to even make it a business of itself. Then there's first degree digitization, when tech is becoming the product. And this is exactly where we're heading with sleep technology. Because our ambition here is to develop products that are not yet in the market, that are not fast followers or copycats, but that are actually innovations. And we are pioneers in that area. Last year, we released a first product that's called OMR Motion, and it's basically a mattress that has a sensor mat and that has two actuators, one at the hip area and one at the shoulder area, to accommodate different sleeping positions of people lying on the mattress. Usually, when you toss and turn during the night, and a lot of people do that, that's totally normal to do that between, 25 and 75 times a night. You need different surface heights actually at the shoulder and the hip position, depending if you lie on the back or lie on the side. What this thing does, the OMR Motion, is actually evaluate how you're lying on it and increase or decrease the height of the actuator in the mattress to adapt to your body and your lying position, which it does without being noisy, or it doesn't make any sound. It's vibrationless, and it lets you sleep with a horizontal alignment of your spine, and lets you sleep better. That's actually something we're very proud of. It's not something that is yet available in mass market. It's kind of where our sleep research team is researching in. And this is like a team of more than 30 engineers and sleep scientists that are developing such products. Very exciting field. Again, not for today, sorry. But still an area where we want to grow intensively in. Now, speaking about global coverage of our business, we are in more than 30 countries today. We are doing business in almost all of the world's largest economies, and are actually also this year very intensively going for the two largest economies of this planet, namely China and the US. Since our inception, and that actually goes back to 2013, when the first company called, back then still called Dormando, was founded by our two founders, Manu and Dennis. Actually, the idea of making our own product and becoming successful with a very, very good, high quality, one-size-fits-all mattress came to be in 2015, and then that was the date when OMR, the sleep company, was founded. Since then, we have skyrocketed our growth. So it was really a very interesting journey, and almost exponentially growing creates challenges, I can tell you. And we will talk about that later also, why this is so important to how we are now deciding also for our new technology platform and our new processes. But what you can already see is going from just two or single digit to two digit to three digit million euros of revenue. And eventually, that's the goal for this year, to crack the €1 billion revenue. That is quite extraordinary in a business where you sell not digital, but physical assets. That is something really, really hard to scale, and that we are very proud of, that we can do that with our lean business model. Now, today we're about 900, a little bit less than 900, 870 people. We call ourselves Emmys. I have a couple of them with me today. And we are working from 5 main offices, but also we have remotees. We also have people located in co-working spaces in different cities, among this also Hamburg. And if you want to put it in a nutshell, what we are, or what this environment at EMMA is, it's a profitable hyper-growth environment. It's a very rare thing, very special, and it is nothing like a mattress company, to be honest. We are very, very proud to be an e-commerce company that can scale like we do. Now you could ask, why is that possible? What's kind of the secret sauce here? Why is EMMA able to do it and others aren't? And the answer to that is deeply rooted in our cultural DNA of the company. So I don't want to read through this. You can also look that up on, I see people doing photos. You can look at that at team.emma-sleep.com because that is the core. That is the core of the company. If you want to reduce, let's say, or condense the entire company and its success to a single thing, it's our cultural DNA. And that is, being with the company a little bit more than 1.5 years now, I can really say that we're pretty much authentic about this. We are a high-performing team that lives by this cultural DNA. Now, we come to the point that you probably came here for. Why? Why would we go and re-platform everything? Why would we actually go into composable commerce? It's a major change, and there must be a good reason for that, because we are not, myself being a technologist or a software developer, yes, I do love technology, but we're not doing such an investment just because we love new technology. We're not doing this just because we like to see how modern tech stacks work, or because it's fun to play with that. It has a strong business reason, and basically the reason is can be seen from 2 different perspectives. You see the symptoms of a problem when you look at your business, and that was kind of the case when I joined the company in 2020. When you look at the business and you have the feeling that the business developing, or the people developing the business are being slowed down. They're being slowed down by the tech teams, by the IT department, by, let's say, a type of or a piece of the organization who would take in feature requests and after time deliver features and functionalities. And a lot of times, why this is so slow is because you accumulated over the time a lot of technical debt and a lot of legacy. And this makes the team slow. And it's totally understandable for the stakeholders in the outside perspective here to not understand why this is so slow, why is this so complex. On the other side, looking internally, you have people facing a not so nice job, needing to build functionalities of things that are already not stable anymore. And this is a big issue. Tech debt is essentially blocking your business development. Now, why is that? How that came that to be? It came to be because you have different stages of such a company. As we might remember, we are there since 2015. So the company is only 7 years old. In those 7 years, in the very beginning, we were a startup. And as a startup, you don't think about so much the architecture, about processes, about solid foundations, about scalability. All you think about is to do business today, to enable business tomorrow, but you don't think about some far distant point in the future where you need to scale out and be able to get to the triple-digit million or million euro of revenue. You don't think about that. You try to solve today's problems, and you are essentially in a survival mode. It's also right to be in such a survival mode because, and here comes one of my personal favorites, Donald Knuth, premature optimization is the root of all evil, at least in programming, and I would even generalize that to tech. If you would have asked or answered the questions in the startup environment or being a startup in the way you are answering them as a scale-up, you would actually die because you would invest in stuff that is not necessary for your business right now. And this is why you're in a very different place when you are a startup versus you are in a scale-up environment where you're hungry for more. Business is running, you need to stabilize the existing business, but you want to get more. You want to exploit opportunities, you want to grow. And in that environment, it is important to take decisions, and sometimes decisions 180 degrees differently than you have done in the past. And yeah, these things that you decided early upon, especially the architecture decisions, they come and haunt you. They come and haunt you, and you need to get rid of this. And this is essentially the hardest part of a startup becoming a scale-up. And it's where a lot of startups, to be honest, fail. Now, side note, if you're researching for a presentation on a conference like this, you need to be really sure about your quotes, because this is actually not the right quote. It was another person. It was actually not Charles Darwin. I would have loved it to be, but it wasn't. It was Leon C. Magnuson who we're referring to. So get your quotes right. But what I was talking about is essentially you can think about this business growth and how you mature as a startup to becoming a scale-up in different areas. You can think about the business architecture, the process architecture, and the technical architecture. And this is kind of a simple diagram now, basically depicting where you as a company, when you grow, when you do this almost exponential growth, you face challenges, because in 2020 we were already there. We were already doing high volume business, globally in more than 30 markets, high complexity in the supply chain, high complexity in marketing. So already pretty much on the right side here. However, still where we were in terms of processes and technical architecture, we're on the left side here. We pretty much outgrew these processes and the technical architecture without having already a plan what to come next. And we kind of dragged this. As you can also see, like, this is not a linear development. This is an exponential development. One thing that is not on here, that is the organizational architecture. That is especially when you grow your business exponentially, even if your headcount only grows linearly, the amount of communication relationships grows to 2 to the power of n. So it becomes really, really complex to run a company that used to be 50, maybe 100 people, and now you have 500 people. This is way more complex. This is not linear. Now, how did we spend our time? If we want to somehow categorize the work that we are investing in the technology area, we could think of something as simple as this, like visible, invisible, positive value, and negative value work. And we were pretty much here in 2020. We were putting a lot of work into bug fixing, cleaning technical debt, but only to the extent where we can actually invest that's freed capacity again in feature work. But it was kind of a tedious job, and it was also not fun to work in such an environment. Where we want to be is here. Feature development. Okay, there's always a bit of tech debt that you create well if you progress, and there's always some bug fixing. One of the important misconceptions about software development: just don't do bugs. Heard that? Yeah. But seriously, that was a big issue for us. That we were in that place where it was all about fixing bugs and waiting for software development to be ready to release a tiny feature for days, weeks, sometimes months. Now, what do we need to grow like we want to, like with the ambition level of Emma? We need something, what we would call business agile tech. So tech that enables us to develop the business in an agile way. We are literally developing in all directions. Also has to do with our cultural code, because believe it or not, our organization is structured in a way that we don't, we optimize for non-waiting states, meaning that we don't have approval processes. We don't use budgets internally. We are almost 1,000 people working without budgets. Everybody's enabled to modify, and able to execute. And as such, what happens is that a lot of people execute in parallel. Sometimes, to be honest, a bit chaotic, but we'd rather do 5 things or 10 things at once than organizing for approval and only doing one thing in the end. So that's kind of the attitude behind that. So we're growing in the world's largest economies. We're becoming more multi-product. Today, we have a limited number of SKUs, but if you also then view on, it's not like that we're selling all the same assortment in all the markets. So if you combine that, still there's some good amount of SKUs. However, we're also thinking about going broader to extend into areas like home decoration. Let's say beyond the bed space. We're exploring partnerships. We're going more omni-channel. I mentioned earlier the online, offline convergence topic. Retail. Again, strong growth potential, but we need and we want to do retail differently than the conventional retailers. Marketplaces, sleep tech. There's so much that we're doing at the same time. And we need a platform, we need technology that enables to grow in all these different directions at the same time without blocking states. So, the existing legacy environment, that is used to be Magento 1. I didn't put the logo on purpose on the slides, but it used to be so it is Magento 1, or used to be Magento 1, and today is OpenMage, the open source version of that. It became cluttered, it became customized in all the different dimensions, and became a big, or accumulated so much technical debt over the time. But there's one thing that is very good about it, to be honest. As it's a monolith, and we never cloned it, it's central. It's one big thing that we need to replace. Because I mentioned this point because I talked with a couple of CTOs also before I joined Emma, just to get a good feeling on what I was getting myself into. And I was talking sometimes about, or with them regarding how would you do e-commerce like it's 2020? And a couple of them were saying, yeah, listen, we would love to do that. However, we need to spend 1 or 2 years just on consolidation of existing cloned systems. So they cloned the systems a couple of years back for different regionalities, then they developed into different directions. Even the data models don't match anymore. Cool thing here, we didn't have that. We had a better starting position here, so it was just also a good point in time to go for something like that. It was also very clear that with the current setup in terms of the organization, too many hands involved for simple changes. It was also not that the just incremental improvement would be good enough. So incremental improvement would be, for example, going from Magento 1 to Magento 2. But looking at the architecture, it would have resulted in the same problems overall when it is about organizational scalability. So what became apparent after looking at it is that we need a step change. We need something completely new, and something that will basically enable us to do more concurrently, more in parallel. Timing couldn't have been better, to be honest. It's rare that you find such occasions. Now, how did we do it? How did we go about it? So you look at this situation. At a legacy system, or actually 2 legacy systems. We have Magento 1 and a recently introduced ERP system, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, the mid-range product of theirs. And both were not running well. So even also the BC was the Dynamics. We kind of outgrew that within a year because of our intense growth. the sheer amount of transactions would actually not work in it anymore. So what do we do with that? So we have two not optimal systems. How do we come up with something new? There were people suggesting, look at this, look at that, look at different solutions. Just go for the plain thing, the successor of Magento 1. We thought, nah, we'll create the same problems. We went in there and we actually thought about Conway's law. If you don't know it, Melvin Conway basically has described a very interesting relationship between organizations and technology. The basic idea behind it is that the way you structure organizations, this will replicate in technical design and vice versa. So whatever we would design as the new system landscape needed to be designed in a way like that organizationally it would also scale, not only technically. And with that idea, what we did basically is re-engineer our entire business. You can imagine as a startup, you don't spend time in documenting your business processes. So there was none. So what do you do? Fortunately enough, D2C e-business, at least the early part of the user journey is not that complex. So what we did is actually we went into the business and basically designed the entire process top down with them from scratch. And that was a very interesting approach because we didn't hire an external agency to do that. We got our own team. We created a project and we staffed it with the most experienced engineers and product managers from our side, also taking them off the legacy product, which is important because they need full focus on this. We augmented that with a couple of externals that we trust and that will embed as senior advisors within our teams. And then we basically let them talk to the business and get really to the processes and really understand what the business was doing and what they need. And this exercise is an interesting one because it's putting a couple of people, especially the engineers, quite far outside their comfort zone. But what it did is not only document the business and understand the business well, but it also resulted in intensive growth of people that were limited to a very narrow scope before, understanding the bigger idea of the company and of the business. And that was actually both, for the people and also for the business, a very, very good exercise. What we then did is basically design, and what you see here as a depiction is a very early sketch of what we call a business domain architecture. It's a little bit, let's say, if you know C4, the architecture design language for software, we basically put a little layer on top, defining business domains. And for us, a business domain, there's also another term like Gartner came up with the name of packaged business capabilities, PBC. But it's essentially the same thing. It's basically an area of business logic and data. And you basically define those areas like the e-commerce storefront or the checkout, or the order management, or interfaces with our suppliers. And you basically define those business domains, and then you define the relationships between them. It ended up in a quite comprehensive set of user stories and the technical design that then again also changed shape over time. It's always adapted basically to the latest understanding of the business. But what it did, and we went through this exercise within 3 to 4 months, is give you a very good understanding of what you actually need as a business. So we did that. And then we went into research. We went into research looking for the different systems that are available. And at least only for the business domain of the e-commerce backbone, you're looking at hundreds, literally hundreds of solutions available. So how do you go about that? For once, we also applied something that also Gartner invented. We don't have a subscription, by the way, but we should maybe. Gartner invented the pace layered application strategy, which is a good model to get your head around where do you want to be and what do you want to do yourself and where do you, so kind of what used to be called make or buy strategy thinking. Today it's not even make or buy, but actually rent and make. That's today. But it gives you a better understanding of where you should put your dollars. Because you basically classes or differentiate three classes of systems. Systems of innovation, of differentiation, of record. And of record, you just want to use vanilla as is. You would just want to store your data in it. There's not, you want to configure it, but you don't want to customize it. That's something off the shelf. There's no value in making this a fancy thing or your core competency. So that is kind of where we were, what we were looking at. And another interesting fact, it actually came also well in the same time back then, in 2020, was this statement of Gartner's. By 2023, companies or businesses that adopt composable commerce will outpace the competition by 80%. Don't focus on the 80%. That's just a number. It could be 100, could be 200. Nobody cares. The point here, and the word that is important, is outpace. Be faster. Be faster than the competition. And that is kind of exactly what resonates with our cultural DNA again. Because we want to be fast. We want to be agile. We want to change often and in frequent iterations. That's exactly what we are aiming for, and this is also a good, let's say, a good statement, not something like the only statement that you should bring if you need to talk to your CEO about that, but it's kind of was reassuring to see that also other people that look at the same area have the same thoughts here. So how did we build it? Let's do e-commerce like it's 2020. How did we come about the actual selections of the tools? As I said, there are like literally hundreds of them that you can try out. First and foremost, what we did is define like the architecture principles and paradigms that are most important to us, that are at the very foundation of what we believe makes a strong technology landscape. For us, that were the topics of flexibility, performance, organizational scalability, and the harmonized software development stack. Flexibility means a lot of things. For us, it means to be, again, fast in change, be able to attach and detach systems that are purpose-fit, ideally best of breed. So you decide for something that is has a sound standing in the market, and usually this is via APIs. So this is the main thing. Is something that is not API first would not necessarily make it on the list then. Another thing to consider is open source and vendor lock-in, because essentially you don't want to be blocked by the limited capacity you can get on the talent market. If you go for open source, there's a good amount of supply or a good amount of talent pool available that you can recruit, that you can onboard, that you can maybe source. But if you go for a platform or ecosystem that is closed, that has a proprietary stack, this is difficult. This is really hard. I was in working for a large organization a couple of years back where we had more than 1,500 software engineers, and we had 6 software engineers for Salesforce. So it was a bit difficult because nobody could virtually not help them. But yeah, that was the topic of flexibility. For us means being able to change and change rapidly. Topic of performance. E-commerce is very strongly driven by good web performance. Name first contentful paint, name a couple of metrics that your lighthouse will tell you. But essentially, we design for a e-commerce experience that is using the latest web technologies. And that is not necessarily a common thing, because those things like Jamstack, like Cloud Native, they are there for nearly a decade now. But for a long time, e-commerce was still the last area where the big old monoliths were dominating. So I'm very happy also as a software engineer and that finally the new technology is entering the e-commerce space and the e-commerce arena. Same here for the back-end logic distributed in microservices instead of monoliths, living on the cloud, message queues instead of DBMSs, all these new technologies driving performance and eventually then conversion rate. Now, scalability, a lot of people tell you about technical scalability. I won't. For me, it's all about organizational scalability. Decoupling horizontally enables you to do more things in parallel, but being also, it also has an interesting dependency. What can you deploy? So what can you actually play out as features? And then it becomes also very important to not do only horizontal, but also vertical decoupling. It is essentially about creating teams that can work autonomously and deliver their work autonomously. And best, actually, if you build teams that you can call empowered product teams. I'm using the wording of Marty Kagan here. If you want to look that up, that's also something very, very nice and very strong that I can only encourage you to look into, building empowered product teams. Regarding harmonized software development, you need to have a solid foundation. And the point for us was to rebuild this from scratch, as the old environment was working good enough, let's say, for the legacy stuff, but not good enough to build anything new on top of it. So we basically went all in on the greenfield and redesigned the software development process, the CI/CD tooling, how we document architecture, entirely like describing tech stacks. How do we want to build software? And this is basically forming an engineering culture that is important to have when you are going into composable commerce, because you're doing sophisticated software development now. And that is, you need to really also be on the edge regarding your toolings here and your processes. We decided, however, to not go exotic. That's maybe, modern is good, exotic is bad, again, because it limits your availability of talent. Interestingly enough, a good amount of these principles that we defined really resonate well with Mach, with the Mach Alliance that was formed not too long ago. Basically, very technical term of microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless. But essentially defining these engineering principles as the very foundation of on how to build engineering first products. And it's kind of no surprise that a lot of the tools that we eventually ended up to choose are members of the Mach Alliance. Not all of them, but a good amount. Now, also an interesting problem is how to name something like that. Naming is a serious problem. If you choose poor naming, then you end up in having very, very awkward discussions or writing very awkward messages regarding, I don't know, do you want to join our new channel in our Microsoft Teams team? You end up with stuff like that, and that is not cool. So what we came down to is giving the thing a name. Replatforming is the project, but what's the product platform? What's the name of that? And we came with the name of COS. It's Emma's Commerce Operating Systems. And it's something that, if you give it a good name, people have a good idea of what it is, and it creates context that will help you to have the right discussions with the business. Now, we have a name, but how do we basically roll it out? I depicted our process here. It's a bit, yeah, let's say, and might be a bit detailed, and it might also be a bit rough in other areas. But essentially what it should show you is that within the timeline of 2 years, our ambition was to re-engineer our business, research, evaluate, do real POCs, so real proof of concept with the 3 solution candidates for each business domain. And that's also something worth to mention, actually, because we tried the things out. We did not rely on sales presentations. We actually developed against APIs of the environments that we were given by the vendors. Then you need a couple of weeks to contract. You need a couple of weeks to make the final deals, and then we started developing. For us, everything is cornered or centered around the idea of minimal viable products, so bring something to market and to use early as we can deliver value. And we went also a little bit with the logic of our business, because in our business we have basically 3 categories of markets that we're doing business in. We have like the very big countries where we do most revenue, where we do the majority of transactions. That is what we call trailblazers. These are, let's say, currently a couple of European countries where we do 80 to 90% of our business. This is high volume. Then we have, on the other side of the spectrum, the so-called pioneers. Pioneers are countries where the business case is not yet proven. Usually we start this, and this is part of, again, our recipe for success. We start this in a very lean way, meaning we want to enter a new country, XYZ. We gather a small project team within the company. We let them send a container of mattresses to that country, rent a warehouse, have that in there, pull up a Shopify website for that, and let them do marketing in that country and see if it lifts off. If it lifts off, and they're going like a threshold of business, then we move them to the emerging state or the emerging maturity layer. In that area or in that maturity of the business, we are then migrating this business towards the platform where we can handle a high amount of transactions with automated means, which is not the case for the Shopify setup. And this is also how we went about it. So right now, you can see it from the orange marking here. We have already launched 2 pioneers. That was last year. We have launched recently our Mexican site. So if you go to emma-colchon.co.mx, that's the new site, that's COS. And we are about to launch 2 more and go for the first trailblazer. The basic idea behind it, unlock levels of complexity one after another, and then go broad. And we feel quite confident that we can do the rollout until end of the year. Also because that's one thing that we learned in this agile process of the rollout. By decoupling and phasing, we can actually bring value even earlier. If we not say, let's say, one country is always a big bang scenario and we need to roll out all the different components of course at once, but we can go with the online store first and have the order management of the legacy systems still handle this, because we have maybe some external dependencies that we need to deal with first. But we decoupled that, and that was also essentially the idea behind setting these teams up in such an autonomous way that they can deliver on their own, in their own pace. So, essentially, in the end, we want to get rid of the legacy system. Fortunately, we have a very good idea when we can do that. One part of the answer to that, how we can you be sure when to decommission the legacy system, is we do not migrate data. That's important. If you are going for such a step change between systems, avoid migrating data as much as possible. So, and then as I was elaborating, what we call developer experience, so the entire technology stack, the entire software development life cycle, AWS environment, CI/CD, all of that we basically did from scratch. And that is COS, a very, yeah, very simplistic view, and it does not necessarily show all the interfaces. It's just only to make the obvious and the selected solutions visible. But this is kind of what we're working with here. So we have the storefront, we have a content management backend, the store backend, for which we use commercetools. There's marketplaces and the retail B2B business, ERP. Internally, we don't call it actually ERP because ERP is not, it's not a business domain, it's not a purpose. Enterprise resource planning is just the name, the legacy name of the entire thing. However, we internally call it by the actual business domain name, that is finance and operations. So about finance and it's about operations, nothing more, nothing less. There's a couple of other things that we are also basically connecting here, up, down, or downstream to the warehouse management that we do with Pulpo. Now, one thing that I like to give a little bit deeper look upon is why we chose commercetools. Commercetools is for us a good choice because in our evaluation process down to the proof of concepts that we did, because it basically brings those four qualities that are listed here. So it has the large feature set. You can already do a lot from with the feature set that is built in, and with all the APIs you have available, you have a good amount of functionality that you can trigger. You have a good amount of data that you can access. You have cross-concern functionalities like identity and access management built in. There's a workable PIM. So there's a good amount of functionality that you can start with, and that's maybe the even more important part. It is functionality that you can use, but that you don't have to use. There's a rich ecosystem that comes with it, be it with the developer tooling. It's very convenient for developers, very developer-friendly. It brings out-of-the-box integrations with Terraform and GraphQL. That's very convenient to build it with and against it. But it has good interfaces in terms of a marketplace, so you can actually have a lot of third parties out of the box be connected to it. It is very extendable, and this is something that actually a couple of the competing solutions disqualified with because the data model. In a lot, sometimes if you look at such a solution of a vendor, then you sometimes kind of smell where the original idea and from what industry they come from. And sometimes they're optimized for their like fashion SKUs. Sometimes it's more like industrial. It has a smell of industrial or engineering. With the data model that you have in commercetools, you can actually work quite well. You can extend it, it's quite flexible, yet you don't. You always should get that ringtone in your ear once you try to build around a data model and start customizing stuff that was not intended to be that way. If you have that, then you might reach the end of the extendability of the data model. With commercetools, we did not have that feeling. If you're into event sourcing, it's also one of the strongest in the field. And also, I won't lie, there was also another competitor we were really intrigued also by the freshness of the technology stack and how they were building things. However, if you're like us, migrating a business in the triple-digit million, you need stability as well. You cannot go with a solution that might be deprecated next year because the company is bought and they just discontinue the product. So you also need the stability of the provider. And when we were looking at it, I feel like a couple of weeks later, they closed their Series C funding, which gave us a good feeling that this is kind of um, a solid partner to work with. Now, targets. I showed you a little bit of how we went about rolling out, but it's also interesting that it's not like an easy thing to even know what the targets are, because you're comparing apples to oranges here. You're not replacing like a system with another system of its kind, or even or of its architecture or anything like that. So actually, what happens is that you need to be very aware that you're moving over business at a risk. So when moving over business to a new platform, there's a risk that you just diminish your conversion rate and you don't do business anymore. And then what? So yeah, they say the easiest migration is always if you close down business and set up the business in the new system. But that is not a valid idea because you need to be running your business. And for us, that meant we defined margins, we defined thresholds of conversion rates and also business revenue that we were, let's say that's what that we would define as our like hunger for risk, or appetite, risk appetite. Sorry, I was missing the word here. That we defined as our risk appetite, and then we need to somehow design everything that we are building around that risk appetite. So we're risking a couple, let's say, to perform a little bit worse than the old store did, but again, coming back, enabling us for fast switchover, for fast migration. That was the most important thing again, because also you need to be aware if you're running two platforms in parallel, that is also hosting two or accommodating two technology teams working with very different tech stacks, and that can actually bleed a company dry. So you need to make sure that this transition period is as short as possible. We optimized for first value as fast as possible, using phasing, using decoupling, as I said, using, for example, already the new storefront before the order management is ready to roll out. This is the decoupling aspect. The phasing aspect is actually being able to have both systems, old and new, run in parallel and try out things. Because the first rollouts that we did were like Colombia and Chile were quite binary. We switched the new store on and looked at how it was behaving. It was low business anyhow, so the risk was moderate. But the bigger we go regarding the markets that we roll out, the bigger also the risk gets. So we need to also be able to do fast rollbacks if necessary. Yeah, last point, I already told you. Never do data migration. Side note, ERP. You can maybe, there's always a compromise. Always there's one exception to the rule. For us, this is the ERP, or the finance and operational core. And that is because you don't have a lot of choices here. ERPs are very enterprisey. There's what happens in e-commerce now is fortunate for the industry, because with the Mach Alliance and with the new vendors, there's technical innovation finally coming to that domain. Still, this didn't happen in the ERP space. Still, you have 3 or 4 big solution providers that you can work with, and we happen to work with Microsoft here. And what does that bring is also kind of a very conventional model of collaboration, where you are directly interacting with a provider if you're working with one of those new players in the Mach field. In that more enterprisey world, you are working with partners of them. And usually what they try to do is sell you really long projects. They call it agile, but essentially it's a waterfall just with a couple of iterations. The point for us here was that that's not how we do things. That's not Emma. That's not how we can or were willing to do such a project. Actually, what we did is revamp the process. Usually also in ERP projects, it's the case that the client sources all of the ownership of the ERP project out to the partner of the solution provider. And we didn't want that either, because we are all about ownership. We need to own these things. We need to own the systems. We need to own the data. We need to own the operations of it. And for us, that meant having our own team, building up our own workforce. So we have a team of 12 developers in our office in Manila that are ERP developers. That meant also that we radically redesigned the approach to the project so that we can actually have the first value delivered in an ERP sense, that is the first country rolled out with finance functionality within 50% of or half of the time that was originally proposed. And by the way, also at like a third of the cost. That is kind of also what kind of makes us proud, because it is bending kind of these conventional rules of the industry. And what I can only wish for is that what is happening right now with Mach in the e-commerce space also will ultimately happen in the ERP space, in the enterprise field. Now, a couple of things that also are important, and you might lose let's say oversight at some point if you don't do these, because there's a couple of points in such a project where points in time in such a project where you should really revisit how you're doing things. Because if you're a year in such a project, it's kind of the biggest project in the company, you are so focused on a certain scope that you're working on, you sometimes get lost in it. And that is also what happened to us, to be honest. And it was very fortunate that our colleagues outside of technology challenged us. Because challenging, again, coming back to the company cultural DNA, challenging is part of our everyday job at Emma. Because we have so many smart minds in the company, and we need and want their input all the time, basically. And what basically they were asking us, and it really helped for them to be out of the box, out of tech people, is: are we doing this right? Are we working on the right things right now? Are we prioritizing right? Then are we doing the things we are prioritizing in the right way? Do we really understand the problem before jumping into solutions? Can we do it more pragmatic, more simplistic? Can we maybe just not do a couple of things? Prioritization is not about the things that you do, but about deciding what you not do. And then eventually, what is a version 1? What is going to replace the legacy system? Now, I can be true with you here. We wouldn't have come up with the idea of decoupling the different systems from another if we wouldn't have had that input. That was really important, and I can only advise you, if you are in a similar situation, get outside input. If you just go to your cave and do your thing, and you do it for 1 or 2 years, you're doing something wrong. You need this outside input. Now, a little bit of clickbait, sorry for that. But it's important, because if I want to give you some, let's say, final thoughts or some takeaways here, it is have that vision created early. This vision needs to be at the core, at the beating core of your company, at the beating core of your business. Also, it needs to inspire. If it doesn't inspire you, or the people that you're working with, again, it will not lift off. It needs to be so compelling that people will quit, literally quit their jobs to join this team. You should plan top-down early and refine. We saw that with the business domains, and or Gartner calls it PBC. And then not forget to test it. Test it bottom up. Trust your engineers, but also challenge them. Pull them out of their comfort zone. Get them into the business. Really understand the business. Build an amazing team. Easy to say, hard to do. Never settle with average. Never hire brilliant jerks. Never a good fit. Hire for attitude, not for experience or skills. Experience and skills you learn. Attitude is something that's really, really difficult to change. And that's also kind of, again, connects with the Emma DNA. We want to build the smallest high-performing team. Regarding organizational, the organizational model, you need to make sure that it scales. There are different organizational models. If you're a tech team of 30, of 50, of 100, or of 150, design something that will scale and has some room to grow with you. You need to define roles. You need to encourage lateral leadership, very important in empowered product teams. Read about empowered product teams. Read Marty Kagan, important, very good, and very different setup towards a delivery team. And make sure that you build the product teams in the right way that minimizes the dependencies on external teams. Because product teams are essentially about that. They're about putting all the skills in a single team that are necessarily to succeed. Like a startup within your bigger organization. You have teams that enable them, like platform teams, all good and fair. The focus needs to be on empowered product teams. Define solid fundamentals of engineering and their principles. So that's, if you don't do that, you cannot build an engineering culture that will be able to work with this new world, to be honest. Because this is cutting edge technology. This is cutting edge software engineering. If you have a mindset of, I don't know, here's dev, there's ops, different departments, it won't work. You need to really embrace all this new tech and the engineering culture, and that's something hard to build. It's built bottom up. It's built by your engineers. It's built by your tech leads and your engineering managers. It's not something that you can oppose or buy from the outside. Embrace rent and make. It's not buy and make or buy versus make at its worst anymore. It's rent and make. Don't fall for not invented here syndrome. I've seen a couple of companies that would not take good technology because they didn't invent it themselves, and that was the reason. So that don't fall for that. That's a fallacy. Rent what others build better. Build what you do better than others, even if it's not your core business. Just then, if you do that, remember to build it in a multi-tenancy way, so that you're not only building it for yourself. And be bold. Just because nobody did it doesn't mean it can't be done. Speaking of what we did and what we are doing, I'm holding a presentation here, but I did not build the system. The Emma's team did it. And that's why I like to maybe give a little applause of myself. You might join me if you want to that team. And here you can see a couple of them. And that is kind of my presentation here. If you want to read more about it, feel free to go to our tech blog. There's more details there. To be honest, we kind of publicize our architecture decision records to a certain extent. Not every little detail, but the main things are in there. So this is like a 9-piece series on what I was telling you about now. And also you can read there what's happening next. If you want to know more about Emma and understand about its culture, I also encourage you to listen to the podcast that Philip did with our co-founder Dennis. Only in German, unfortunately, like the OMR podcasts are. However, also very insightful about our company culture. And that is me. If you want to stay in touch, feel free so. And I would love to get your feedback via a short survey, if you want to give us that. And with that, this is basically where I conclude. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. And we are still here. I didn't have the time, that's so to say, in mind so much, but Sony and Florian and I and Robert are here to answer also your questions, even if they are more technical. So, thanks. Any questions? So, any questions? No? No? No questions? You can ask us anything. I think it still works if I walk around the room, right? Okay, perfect. Here, there you go.
Thank you.
Maybe you can pass it to the next person asking a question, that because then if I need my colleagues here, then I can go to them already.
I'm gonna do this, of course. I have a question.
Now I don't hear your question.
Oh, no? Is it?
Do you have a set of headphones for me? Okay. Test. Yeah?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. It's a question regarding order management. How was your decision process deciding that you have an extra software for order management instead of building it in your commerce platform?
Yeah, sure. So the perfect, I have the perfect person here to answer that. Here's Sony, our tech lead of the order management.
Yeah. So what we did was we decided to have basically the order management is the central place where which manages your entire life cycle of order, and thereby also interacts with or is responsible to respond to customer emails and other things. So why we decided on a separate system was we wanted to have the same customer experience and also the way we distribute orders to our fulfillment partners, our warehouse locations, was something very business specific, and we did not want to have business logic built into the online store, because online store is more to sell, right? You don't fulfill orders through your store backbone or your online store front end. You have different business rules. For example, what it would take to deliver order from warehouse A versus a warehouse B. What are the cost aspects of it? What are the operational aspects of it? Where does the stock lie? So these are more operational and more logistic side of things, which does not sit well with the online store and with the online shop. So the online shop is more about selling, and that is where the composable commerce part comes in. You dedicate your systems towards doing one thing. You don't do multiple things in a single system, because then you make it a monolith. You don't make it composable, and you don't make it distributed. So that, I think, answers your question.
Yeah, one thing to add maybe is that our business regarding the order management is already quite complex, as you can imagine, with more than 30 countries and also different channels that we're serving. It has a level of complexity where it actually makes sense to decouple that from the rest and not try to bend something that is not meant for this kind of a complexity.
Okay, thank you. And have you put your procurement part also in that order management, or is it built into your ERP?
Right now, the procurement is in ERP, and we have still not decided where the procurement is going to lie in the longer term, because we are still testing markets. As Andrea said, we try to test before we do it. So the OMS knows about how much stock is in what location and kind of what the supplier is, but it does not know what is the cost of procurement and where does the product sources it from, because the responsibility of OMS is to fulfill orders, not to tell about where this producer is producing or what is the cost of it, because that's more like the ERP and the finance side of things. So the core responsibility of OMS is to fulfill orders, and not to tell other associated information whether we did profit on this order or not. That's the responsibility of another system. So we try to segregate topics.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Hi. I have a question as well. Thanks very much, guys. You talked, Andreas, about wanting to avoid replatforming and how that can create bottlenecks for your developers and the people that work within Emma. So, from a Mac perspective, especially, how important do you feel it is for leading enterprises to remain, so to say, vendor agnostic?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the most important thing to stay vendor agnostic, but you need to be flexible. And actually, it can make a lot of sense to go for a vendor lock-in for a specific part. Imagine you're doing something very sophisticated with machine learning, for example, and you can use a pre-trained service offering, a pre-trained ML offering of a vendor like Google. It definitely makes sense to go for such a vendor lock-in, even if that would mean that you need to restructure and reinvent the entire thing when you go if you want to go away from that again. However, it's again, it's not such a binary decision. It's something where you need to basically put a lot of factors in. Vendor lock-in can make sense if you have the ability to go away from that or to detach at some point without losing too much. The bigger the systems get, the bigger the ecosystems get. At some point, for us, that was definitely a criterion. The vendor lock-in will will deflexibilize you so much that it's not a valid option anymore. And so you need to take, let's say, the scope into consideration. And I would go for vendor lock-in if the scope is limited. But if we are talking about something like the e-commerce backbone, no way. It's not a real option then.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? I can give somebody the microphone. Anybody?
You've talked a lot about commerce tools. Do you use for the storefront, View Storefront, Frontastic, or do you build the whole customer experience part yourself?
Actually, that's an interesting question because, and there's on the tech blog there's actually a section about exactly that. We decided we tried Frontastic, we tried also a couple of other things like View Storefront and a couple of other technologies. We decided against all of them. And basically build the storefront from scratch using Vue and Nuxt. So very basic because it's a very it's a technology or a tech stack very well available also for talent, or talent is available for that tech stack. And for us, again, it's about being able to execute fast and deliver soon. And actually looking at what Frontastic was and View Storefront were offering us, it did not bring that level of flexibility that we would have needed. I think it's a great choice for early adopters because they run a couple of things for you, they run a couple of infrastructure things for you, but we actually need those infrastructure as code and CI/CD ourselves for the other parts. So we could simply reuse them also there. So there was no point in building up a second infrastructure layer with a SaaS. So for us, that was kind of the rationale not to go with those.
Thank you.
Okay. Then, anybody else? No? Any question is welcome. Okay. Then, thank you so much for being with us, for listening in. It was a pleasure to be here, also with our partner of commercetools. Also, if you have questions regarding commercetools, Robert is also here to answer them. Even if it's very technical and deep, you can do that as well. Otherwise, I would leave you with a couple of tips regarding good sleep. what to do and what not to do, just as an indication that we really care about your sleep and about making people's life better with good sleep. Thank you so much.